So I wanted to do a video on the Hope Tech 4 brakes, and you can obviously get a Tech 4 X2, E4 and a V4. This one is on the E4, but as far as I'm aware the calipers are all the same as the Tech 3 stuff. The only difference is with this one I've pulled one of the pistons out a little bit, and you can just see that it's now a stainless steel piston, and in the middle it's got the phalonic stuff. So the phalonic stuff was these kind of original pistons that Hope started to use probably around, well, maybe 2005, somewhere around there. So it's still got this piston in the middle, but the outer side of the piston is stainless. The rest of the caliper, as far as I can see, looking at the tech documents, they're all exactly the same as the Tech 3 stuff. So yeah, I'm guessing that the Tech 3 lever was a kind of weakness in that equation. What we're going to do is we are going to get that in shot. That would be helpful. We're going to basically take this hose off and dismantle this lever. I'm just going to run through a few of the changes that they've made and compare it to the Tech 3, because there are some things on here that are a little bit different and I think a little bit better as well. So yeah, I'm just going to take the hose off. This is all full of fluid, so I'm going to drain all that out, and then we'll do some sort of comparison. Yeah, here we have the Tech 3 and the Tech 4 levers, or lever. As you can tell, both right side. There are some obvious differences between them. I kind of expect the internals will be the same. As you can see, there is a bearing on this one. So if we zoom in on that a little bit, this one is just a pivot. So it's just basically it's like a bolt that goes all the way through and comes out there, and it's got like a little circlip on it. Whereas this one has got a little roller bearing for the pivot on the top, and it's also got one on the bottom as well. And what that means is you just got a little bit, it's a little bit easier to move the lever, and I think that's going to improve the modulation a little bit. On this one, yeah, the Tech 3s were good and this moves nice and smoothly. But this is just, yeah, it feels completely different. It's so much smoother. It's a nice feeling. And the other thing as well is probably the clamp as well. So what we have is two bolts here, and you can basically move the clamp. You can take that clamp off completely. Whereas on the Tech 4, what you've got is a hinged clamp, which if you're kind of used to Shimano and other brands, I think that's kind of been the standard for a lot of them. But it doesn't have that annoying feature on the Shimanos where it'll only go to there until you press a little ball bearing in. I'm not really sure on the advantage of that, but it must be a weight saving thing. I'm going to weigh them in a little while to see if there's any difference. One of the changes that I do like on the Tech 4 is that if we aim this straight, so I've got little lines on the camera screen, so that's about straight there. So there's a line on my screen that goes across there. You can see that the lever sits nice and straight. Everything's kind of more 90 degree, whereas on the older Tech 3 stuff, if I put that reservoir straight, you can see the lever's at like a 45 degree angle. So if I actually wanted that lever straight, everything's like that. And I guess that was my pet peeve. It just annoyed me sometimes. It looked a bit weird on the handlebars, depending how you wanted to orientate your kind of lever. I kind of run my levers down because I stand up a lot. But for some people that I knew that sit down a lot and they wanted quite straight levers, I don't know, it didn't look like it was kind of in the right position. It looked a bit weird, I guess. So yeah, what we're going to do, I guess now, is I'm going to weigh them, and then I'm going to strip this lever. I could strip this lever at the same time and just compare the parts, I guess, and see if that's any different. There is a tech document that you can look up and it will show you anyway. So yeah, we've got our little weighing machine that the camera's struggling to focus on. There we go. If we chuck so that's upside down, so I'm guessing that's a 96 rather than a 56 is the way that I see it. So yeah, that was a 95, sorry. And then we've got your Tech 4, which you have to remember has got more kind of parts on it. So I should have been smarter and guessed that it would be heavier. Yeah, so you got a, was that a 102? So you got a 7 gram difference, if that's kind of bothering you. I know a lot of people with the bike industry, they're weight weenies. So yeah, let's get on to dismantling the Tech 4. So yeah, we will get around to dismantling this in just a second. One of the things that I'd hoped for is that the reservoir caps were compatible, and obviously they're completely different sizes. which is a bit annoying because you've got to buy different diaphragms, different top caps, a different bleed tool as well. So yeah, that would have been good, because when they done the XCR lever, they actually done the same kind of a tech-free top cap on there, so it's all compatible. Just something that they could have done. They've obviously got their reasons for making a bigger reservoir. As for these bolts, they are torx T10. Kind of stops people rounding them off, I guess. Stops them getting stuck in there versus, say, an Allen key. So yeah, we're just going to undo that quickly. So there's your top cap, which you've probably come to get used to with Hope stuff, and the little rubber diaphragm. Pretty basic. Also your standard deflector plate in there. When you squeeze a lever and then let go, when you're letting go, it's essentially creating a vacuum, I guess, and it's pulling fluid that way. And without that plate in place, it will just squirt up out of the lever, so that's pretty good. It's pretty warm in the UK, and I think my throat's a little bit dry, so you might find a little bit croaky at times, coughing a bit. But yeah, let's get on to the next bit, which is the pivot. And underneath here is actually a 6mm nut. So that's going to go on there. And then the top one, this little bit here, that's a 2.5mm Allen key. So that's kind of basic fittings. I'm just going to undo that a little bit, because I find this is quite stubborn to get it out. So we're just going to slacken it off a bit. And then we're going to use the bottom part to essentially push the pivot through. There we go. So hopefully that's enough. It's quite stiff, and I guess it's got to go for a lot more than what it used to. Now that we've got a few bearings in there. See how much we can get away with. Probably not much more. There we go. No. So that's probably all we're going to get out of that one. Then we'll have to try and push that through like a little prodder or a flat end. And just be prepared, because your lever might fly off once you remove this pivot. Don't know where the camera's focusing on. There we go. There we go. So there's your pivot and your nut. There we go. You can probably see on the nut it's the same width as this, so it sits inside the bearing nicely. So that's that. Then we take this off, and then you've got your, once again, the standard setup that you're probably used to if you've taken tech-free stuff apart. It's just the same thing really, just seems like a kind of smaller, kind of trimmed down version with a little spring that pushes on the little brass dowels and lets you kind of click the adjusters. So now we're on to this stuff. And for some reason they like to use these security bits, which I don't really get. They know that people are going to, like home mechanics are going to strip these brakes down. They sell the parts for them, and yet they put this kind of stuff on there. Not really sure what that's about, but yeah, it's going to be one of these kind of security bits with a hole in. This one's a T10. I'm just taking a guess at that. Looks about the right size. Yeah, so that's basically slotted on that bolt down into there. And once again, just be aware that the end of the piston might shoot out once you take the pressure off. So once you've done that, you should be able to just pull the piston out. There's a little bolt, oh, it's still in there, that's fine. And then that's your internals basically, which is very, very similar to the tech-free stuff. The piston's a little bit different. It's like the XCR one where they put this kind of nylon bit on there, maybe to save a bit of weight. I'm not too sure on that. Yeah, pretty standard stuff, and very easy to deal with. As for the lever, you can see that's empty now. You can see stuff underneath it, or through the hole. There we go. And that's that really. This is pretty basic. Same as the tech-free. Let me see if I've got some spare tech-free stuff, and then we can compare and see if anything's kind of dramatically different. So yeah, I have actually got this, which is a brand new tech-free piston. As you can see, if I put the end to end, there's a slight, well, it's probably a lot in terms of braking, but you can see that let's put both of them to there. You can see that the tech-free piston is a bit smaller overall length, and maybe that's where they're getting their extra 30% from. If this is coming out further and being pushed in more, maybe it could take more fluid with it or create higher pressure. So yeah, I have actually bled the brakes. I've got a couple of these Tech 4s and I did bleed them, but they come with a 2-meter hose, so the lever feel isn't that great on a hose that long. But as for testing them, I don't really have anything to test them with, so I'm just here to dismantle them and basically talk about them. If you want someone that's actually going to test them, I guess you've got to look for someone that's a riding reviewer that's going to put them on their bike and go out and give you some sort of opinion. That's not for me. So yeah, the only thing I can see different internally is that the piston is slightly different. I was going to rebuild this now, but I forgot I haven't really shown you the bearings, which is probably one of the bigger upgrades. I think some of the SRAM stuff was probably brakes older than the SRAM guides that have been using bearings on the levers probably for years now. But yeah, that's obviously going to wear out and be a part to replace. Don't know if you can get little ceramic ones in there that will last longer. But yeah, obviously there's a bearing right there and then one at the bottom. I'm not too sure how well these are in terms of their fitment, because on one of the levers that I have, and these are all brand new stuff, this one, as you can see on the bottom, there's no bearing, so it's come brand new from Hope and the bearing's missing. And I did kind of contact them about it, and their attitude was like, oh, just nothing to do with us, you'll have to ask the person that you bought them from. So I ended up looking up the bearing size, 6482RS, so it's 9mm. Let me show you on this one if you ever need them. So the outside diameter is 9mm, the inside diameter where the pivot sits is 4mm, and then the width of them is 4mm as well. I could probably get that pivot and just show you that system as well. You can have a little jiggle and see how well they fit, how well this pivot is machined with the tolerances, I guess. So that sits in there. Let's try and grab that. Yeah, I can't feel any play in that whatsoever, so that's a nice kind of fitment in there. So yeah, I guess we'll get on to rebuilding that lever now. Get this one a bit out of the way. There we go. So yeah, this should be pretty straightforward. It's always nice working on brand new stuff as well. I'm used to old stuff, so yeah, your spring doesn't go like that. Don't do that. It actually goes that way. So yeah, that's a nice little system. Going to drop that into the hole. Doesn't matter if your spring goes down. That should line up once it's in there. And when you push these in, even though this is new, you don't just want to kind of just ram it in. Just try and wiggle it and get the seals to kind of seat in there happier. Sometimes if you just push it, you might snag one of the seals, especially on older stuff that's a little bit worn. But yeah, there's a lot of force coming back on that. So what we're going to do is line up this little plate. I've never taken this lever apart to this extent, so what I'm doing now is basically just essentially winging it, just going on the other brakes. Probably the Hope Moto brake is probably the best example. because that if you don't push down on this piston and you try and tighten things, what happens is this black retaining plate doesn't sit flush in there. So yeah, kind of struggling with the light a little bit, but that's what we're going to do. Get our little T10 torx security bit ready. We're just going to push on that and take the kind of pressure off. It's going to be really difficult to see in there, but try and line things up. And what I did notice is undoing this screw, it was actually really tight. It's quite surprising. I thought I'd just be able to kind of come up to it and do that, but no, they've done it pretty tight. So that's that in there. What we want to do is get a little close up. It's pretty hard when you've got like black and it's so shiny, but don't want you focusing on that either. So what you want to make sure is that the little black retaining plate, that little kind of metal plate with a rubber coating, is sitting nice and flush and it's not sticking out from this kind of area here. So that's all good. And you can see that in there. When you do this kind of stuff, if your hands are covered in like brake fluid and whatnot, you might get like a pool of brake fluid down here. You might just want to clean it up just for the future, just so you don't think, oh, is this brake leaking because I can see fluid down here type of thing. So if you want to clean it up, just a little cotton bud. I did notice when I bled the other one that a lot of fluid ended up in this area as well. So yeah, so what's next? I guess it's the lever. Pretty straightforward. Try and take this apart a bit more if I can get these things out. There we go. So they do have these little brass. Oh man. So yeah, I was just going over the lever, but the camera overheated. It's about 30 odd degrees in the UK, but it's quite humid as well. So it's kind of doesn't last very long before it overheats. So that's what's inside the lever, and you've got to make sure you don't lose them when you take it apart. What that does is it pushes on the adjuster screws for the reach and the pad bite contact point. So if you lose them, your screws on your lever will just move freely like that. So they drop into these holes, and what it is, they go in, so the round kind of bullety shaped edge goes in first, and then you leave the flat edge out, and then the spring touches on the flat edge. Come on, don't know why you're focusing miles away. There we go. So I missed that anyway. There we go. So you can see the flat bit goes there, and then the spring push against that, and it means that you can adjust your lever with some kind of degree of accuracy. Stops that from spinning freely. And then the same on this one. There's a little kind of brass insert in there as well. You've got your roller bearing. So that just goes there. Oh, and the other thing is if you go to the minus, so on this reach adjuster, if you turn that all the way out, it will be less tension on your spring. So when you fit this whole lever assembly to the kind of master cylinder body, it's a lot easier because there's not as much tension. Like if you've got that on all the way, it's a little bit further, it's pushing it away more. So in order to get that over there, you've got to put more pressure on it. So yeah, just unwind that and it should help you get that onto the lever. So what we need now is our little pivot, which is just out of shot, so we'll just come out of there and just try to line things up best you can. What you could do if you wanted to is use an Allen key and just try and kind of line that up in there. A bit difficult to look at the camera and do it, but that's about right. I reckon we'll get that on. There we go. So if you just kind of wiggle the lever back and forth, you should be able to push that pivot into there, and then you've got your little 6mm on the bottom. The other thing with this is it gets tight very, very quickly. So it might feel like you're cross-threading it, but it's fine until you get a little way on the thread. I'm not sure if there's a bit of Loctite or if it's coming into contact with a bearing and it's got to go through the middle of the bearing, and that's why it's a bit tight. I'm just going to push that so it's actually pushed into the bearing, and then we need our 6mm and a 2.5mm Allen key. We're just going to do that up. I don't think there's any setting, like torque setting for this, so what I would do is just nip it. I should have looked at the pivot, but I do imagine there's a bit of Loctite on there, like the old bolts. So yeah, we've got to a point where we can't turn that with a little bit of effort, and then I'm just going to nip it up. I think it actually locks, it kind of gets to that point, and you can kind of feel that it doesn't really want to go any further. You'd have to put quite a bit of effort through there, and then that's your lever sorted. Just going to put some reach adjust on there. There you can go, and put your little diaphragm on, put your top cap on, and then do this. Obviously you're going to do this after you bleed it all. One thing with the top caps as well, if you do them like left and right, well, that was the wrong way to put top cap on. If this had fluid in there, what you want to do is kind of put one end on first and just roll that on and just let that sink, and then some of the fluid will be pushed over the edge, but it's trying to kind of push any air out. So by doing it like that, hopefully any air that's trapped in there will be pushed out. There's always going to be a bit in there, I reckon. And then T10 Torx for this top cap. What I normally do is just push down on that, just to keep it flat. So if it does come up, it's not going to drag any air or anything like that, just to keep it nice on the diaphragm as well. Nice and straight on the diaphragm, so it's not going to pinch anything. And then what I do is just go back and forth, so I get them to a point where like fingertip turning won't do much anymore. And then I'll just go for like a quarter turn, or whatever it is. It's kind of a setting that I already know. 1, 2, 3, 4. That one's done. That one's done now. So yeah, that's cool. And hopefully that just means that when you put the top cap back on, it goes on nice and flat. But yeah, ultimately that is the Tech 4 lever. Probably quite a long video. And what I'm going to do now is just pull one of the pistons out of the E4 caliper, just to show you compared to a normal kind of E4 piston. Yeah, so this is the old Hope E4 piston. This is a phalonic one, so it's made of like a plastic. That's what the phalonic stuff is. And if we can get that there, you can see they chip quite badly. And then that can end up basically tearing into one of the rubber seals. And then when we compare that to the new one that they've done, you can see it's just a stainless piston, and it just has a smaller version of this, I guess, kind of inserted inside of it. Same size. The other thing that I did notice as well is I have like this old caliper, old M4 number 6 for a boxer fork, and I've taken one of the pistons out, because all the old Hope pistons used to be metal like this. So ultimately it seems that would be the way, I guess. Yeah, so it started with these, went on to these, and now it's got like a combination of the two. So yeah, even if you had some of the older M4 calipers, like the 2-piece calipers, these pistons, they look exactly the same size, so you could get away with that, I guess. But yeah, there's the new hybrid piston, if you're actually going to notice it performance wise. Debatable, I guess, but yeah, there it is.